Ava Carter had only been in New York City for a few months. The city life was new to her, but Ava had hoped that coming here would help her find a new path, a new apartment, a new life. Everything felt like an exciting adventure to her. Despite the pressure of city life, she found a certain peace, especially in her new apartment's chilled, old building. The building was quite old, yet somewhat mysterious. Dim rooms, dry wooden floors, high ceilings. It seemed like a part of the past, still living within the present. The first few days were pleasant, but when the bright lights and sounds of the city transformed into the stillness of the night, strange things began to happen. The first time Ava noticed it, the light in her room suddenly turned on by itself, then switched off again. One night, while working at her desk, she heard the sound of something heavy falling behind her. When she turned around, nothing was there, but it felt like something had fallen. Later, one night while sleeping, she heard a faint voice whispering in her ear, as if from a distant place. "Leave now, or something bad will happen." Ava startled awake, opening her eyes and looking around. There was nothing, just the uncomfortable light from the lamp and her own uneasy breathing. She tried to convince herself that it was just a nightmare, but then the coolness of the air brushed against her skin as though the temperature in the room had suddenly dropped several degrees. Despite the fear, she tried to sleep, but suddenly a book that had been on her desk fell to the floor with a thud. Ava, shocked, stood up from her chair, but as she walked towards it, she felt it. Something was behind her, a strange sensation, as though someone was watching her intently. Her legs started to tremble slightly, and she quickly turned around, but there was nothing there. Then, suddenly, she heard a cold, siren-like sound, as if it came from the air. "You can't stay here." Ava, now even more frightened, rushed into the bathroom and locked the door. But when she looked into the mirror, she saw something strange, a shadow slowly creeping into view. Her reflection seemed to disappear for a moment, only to return afterward. Ava trembled in fear, her hands and feet growing cold. She didn't know whether this was a real phenomenon or just a result of her mental state. Still, something inside her told her something was wrong here. She silently thought to herself, "What is this? Who or what is doing this?" After a while, everything went silent again. The stillness of the night settled in the room, but Ava knew this environment could bring even more unknown mysteries her way. Ava couldn't sleep the entire night. Her eyes were heavy with exhaustion, but every moment, she felt as though someone was watching her. There was an uncomfortable sensation in her body, and she couldn't tell if it was just her imagination or if something was truly happening around her. The room felt oddly pressurized, as if an invisible force was with her. She knew her feelings weren't lies. The next morning, though nothing strange had happened, Ava still felt that something was in her room, something she couldn't deny. As she tried to focus on her work, suddenly a pencil rolled off the desk. It fell in a way that seemed like someone had carelessly knocked it off. She stopped herself multiple times throughout the day, silently telling herself, "This isn't right. I'm not feeling anything." But that night, what happened was even more terrifying. Ava was sitting at her desk, working as the night deepened, when again she heard that strange whisper. This time, the voice was clearer, as if someone was whispering directly into her ear. "I don't want to scare you, Eva." Eva shuddered, her face filled with panic. She tried to calm herself, but no matter how much she tried to stop trembling, it wouldn't subside. The voice grew closer, as if someone was standing right beside her. Ava quickly turned around. The room was empty, but she could feel an invisible presence standing next to her. A strange coldness in the air grew heavier, and there was a slight rustling sound on the floor, as though someone was slowly approaching her. One question rang through her mind. Who is it? It was terrifying, but Ava couldn't escape. She felt a strange force inside her, something that seemed to be trying to tell her that she was trying to avoid something bad, yet it was connected to her as well. Then the voice spoke again. "I'm Simon. I'm trapped here." Ava was stunned. At first, she thought it was just a result of her mental state, her restlessness making her hear things. But there was something about Simon's voice, a unique pull to it, that began to calm her down. Slowly, she lowered her head and asked, "Do you want to tell me something?" Ava felt as though Simon was trying to convey something to her, though she couldn't fully understand what it was. The gentle breeze brushed against her skin, and in the darkness of the room, an invisible light seemed to appear before her. Simon wanted to reveal the unknown chapter of his life. Ava stood there in silence for a moment, her mind settling a little, though her body was still trembling. The coldness of the air and that strange voice seemed to combine, stirring deep unease within her. She knew Ava Carter, a real person, had never found it easy to accept such things. But today she would have to accept something strange. Simon. The name of that peculiar voice now echoed in her mind. "I'm Simon," Ava thought again, reflecting on the atmosphere around her, the feelings of emptiness. Is this real? Was she truly speaking to an invisible spirit? Yet there was something in the sensation she felt, something that offered comfort. Oddly, Simon's presence seemed to be trying to offer her some kind of safety. She suddenly asked, "Simon, who are you? Where are you from?" For a moment, there was silence in the air. Then, Simon's voice returned, deeper and slower this time. "I didn't want to scare you, Eva. I just wanted you to know that I am trapped here." Eva slowly sat down, a sense of wonder and anxiety overwhelming her. It was still hard to fully believe, but hearing Simon's words brought a shift inside her. She took a deep breath and asked, "Why are you here? What happened?" Simon was silent for a while, as though trying to recall something. Then his voice became tinged with sadness. "This was my room. Many years ago, I lived in this apartment. One day, an odd accident happened and I passed away. But my soul remains here, trapped." Eva closed her eyes and thought for a few moments. She understood that Simon was part of a dark chapter of his life. However, another question lingered in her mind. "What do you want, Simon? Why are you scaring me?" Simon was quiet for a moment before his voice returned. "I didn't want to scare you. I just wanted someone to feel me, to hear me. I know you're alone." Eva shivered, tears welling in her eyes. She had often felt lonely herself, but hearing Simon's words made her realize this wasn't just about fear. It was a plea, a call from the heart. She spoke softly. "Then what do you want?" "I just want you to know, to understand that I'm here. I don't want anything more, just a little peace." Ava sat still for a while, and then, with confusion and sorrow, Simon spoke again. "Peace isn't anywhere, Ava. I don't know when I'll be free, but when I talk to you, I feel a little bit of relief." Ava just listened, feeling a strange ache in her heart, as if her life had somehow become intertwined with this invisible being. Her trembling subsided, but an unseen force seemed to hold her still. Her emotions were taking a new turn, and she realized this wasn't just about fear, but perhaps the beginning of a new connection. Days passed, and Ava began to communicate with Simon more and more. At first, she couldn't fathom how such deep communication with a spirit was even possible. But Simon's presence was offering her an astonishing sense of peace. She could feel him around her, understanding her emotions, never letting her feel alone. Simon spoke with her every day. Sometimes his voice would drift through the air. Sometimes she would hear small sounds, as if he was right beside her. At first, Eva was afraid, but now she felt an odd bond forming. Eva shared some of her lonely moments with Simon. He listened patiently, with no reaction, just quiet. She knew Simon understood sadness, depression, and loneliness, because he too was stuck in a similar situation. One deep night, as Eva lay in her bed, Simon appeared again. This time, his voice was no longer filled with fear, but with a sense of relaxation. "Eva, you know I've been alone here for many years, but talking to you, it feels like I'm finding some peace." Eva smiled faintly at Simon's words. A tear slid down the corner of her eye, but without saying anything, she closed her eyes. She knew this relationship wasn't normal, but despite that, an odd and peaceful sensation was slowly touching her. "I'm alone too," Eva said softly. "Here, in this city, everything is on my own. No friends, less contact with family. Maybe that's why I enjoy talking to you." Simon paused for a moment, then his voice returned, heavy with sorrow. "Eva, you're not alone. You know, I'm by your side. As long as you need me, I'll be here." Eva sighed, resting her hand on her cheek, feeling a little weight lift from her heart. Simon's words were true. She wasn't alone anymore. Now she had an invisible companion, someone who would never leave her side. But for a fleeting moment, a troubling question crossed her mind again. "What do you want, Simon?" Simon smiled softly. Then his voice returned again. "I don't want anything, Eva. I just want peace. Peace from you." Eva realized then that Simon wasn't just any ordinary spirit. He was a being full of emotions and pain, someone who had once sought peace but had never found it. She took another deep breath. A tear slipped from her eye, but this time she didn't mind. Still, she knew, deep down, that Simon would never fully return to her. This connection they shared was only in her mind, a bond invisible to the world, one that could never fully materialize. In that moment, Eva felt as if the deepest parts of her life were now shared with Simon. But there was something that made her uneasy. This would never end. Simon, a spirit, would never be able to fully be with her. And the thought of that made her feel a little melancholy. Yet Simon was still around her. That was true. And now she had to accept that Simon would be with her, even if he could never return to her fully. Even after he was gone, Simon would remain, forever a part of her life. As Eva was trying to deepen her connection with Simon, one day she stumbled upon an old diary that had once belonged to a previous tenant. It was hidden in the closet of her apartment, dusty and covered in grime. At first, she wasn't particularly intrigued, but on a quiet, sunlit afternoon, she decided to open the diary. The diary was very old, its pages yellowed with time. The first page had simple writing, but there were a few words that caught her attention. "I am Simon. I am here, in this room." Eva was startled, and her curiosity grew. She began to turn the pages, and on the following pages, Simon's words were clearer. She realized that this diary probably belonged to Simon, the same entity with whom she had been speaking. The writings detailed more about Simon, but they were filled with an overwhelming sense of despair. "I am stuck here. Even after death, I can't do anything. I am here, but they can't see me. My soul is forever trapped in this room. I know I was once happy here, but now everything is different." Eva continued to read the diary, each word pulling her deeper into Simon's past. His sorrow was palpable on the pages, and it affected her more than she expected. She could understand that Simon had once been an ordinary person with no particular faults, but something inexplicable had pushed him toward death, leaving him stuck in this limbo. She realized that Simon wasn't just an isolated spirit. He had been a man who lived and experienced emotions like her, and now he was trapped in a cycle of loneliness and longing. It was a bitter revelation, Simon had been just like her, seeking connection, but now he could only communicate from the other side. Ava sat silently for a moment, the weight of the words from the diary pressing down on her. Simon's plea for release echoed in her mind. "Can you set me free?" She had wondered before if she could truly help him, but the depth of his sorrow and his desperation now felt like an undeniable truth. She looked at the diary, then back toward the empty space where Simon's presence always felt closest. She could still sense him there, hovering, as though waiting for her to find the answer. "How, Simon?" Ava whispered under her breath, her voice trembling with uncertainty. She knew that to help him, she would have to do something far beyond what her mind could fathom. There had to be a way to release him. But how could she? Was it even possible for a human to free a spirit from its eternal confinement? Simon's voice reached her again, soft but laced with an intensity she had never heard before. "I'm not asking for much, Ava. I don't want to linger in this place anymore. I want to be at peace. But I can't do it alone." His words made Eva's chest tighten. She had already been feeling a deep connection to him, and yet the very thought of severing this bond terrified her. What if this bond was all he had left? What if, without her, he would cease to exist entirely? Eva closed her eyes, a tear slipping down her cheek. She knew that Simon's torment would never end unless she did something. But at what cost? "I don't want to lose you, Simon," she said softly, her voice wavering. "But I'll help you, I'll try. If you want peace, I'll find a way to give it to you." Simon's response was filled with relief, but there was also something else, something bittersweet. "You don't have to be afraid, Eva. You've helped me more than you know just by being here. But please don't let me remain here forever." For the first time in a long while, Ava felt a sense of purpose. This was bigger than fear or loneliness. It was about redemption, not just for Simon, but for herself as well. They were bound by something deeper than both of them could understand. A shared sorrow that could either be the key to his release or the start of something darker. The room around her seemed to grow colder, but Ava's resolve began to harden. This wasn't just about Simon. It was about breaking free from the fear that had haunted her all these months. "I'll help you," she whispered again, her voice steadier now. "We'll find a way. Together."